What's up, guys? Welcome to the RotoPros pre-lock show for Tuesday night. We've got 14 games to talk about. Probably won't even actually mention all of them, but a lot of choices, a lot of pitching choices, a lot of good hitting choices. This is going to be a pretty tough one, but there certainly are plenty of good plays out there. So starting with pitching, we've got several very expensive pitchers. Some of them in good matchups, some of them not so good at matchups. All of them are kind of worth considering, but I think we can probably rule out most of them. So the priority for me tonight is Chris Sale. He is the most expensive pitcher on the slate. We'll just get the pricing for all of these guys in front of me. But Sale is facing the Royals at home. Scherzer's actually more. Royals lineup is without Mike Moustakas tonight. He got hit by a pitch yesterday, so he is not in the lineup. The Royals lineup overall looks pretty weak. They do have some righties in there, but not a lot of good hitting. So Salvador Perez, maybe someone to be concerned about. Whit Merrifield is kind of just okay. Chesler, Cuthbert, and Jorge Soler, mediocre hitters against lefties. Cuthbert's pretty bad overall. He's batting third for them. The bottom half of the lineup is just awful. Lucas Duda is left-handed, so you don't have to worry too much about him. Jay, Almonte, Escobar, Alex Gordon. It's a very, very soft lineup, and it probably is a weaker offense overall than, let's say, the Pirates, who actually have a pitcher batting. I think even though this is an American League team with a DH, it's still an easier lineup top to bottom to face for Chris Sale than it is for Max Scherzer. So that's why I prefer Sale to Scherzer. Something of note for tonight is that, and I guess this is notable whenever there are this many games on the slate, is there are going to be value plays. So you can actually spend up more at pitching than you otherwise could because you can fill in plugs that are really, really cheap. When there's this many games, there's just bound to be plugs from teams that just make the lineups work. So for instance, tonight we have Johnny Field is starting. He's literally min price at 2,000 on DraftKings. Gregor Blanco is probably going to be leading off for the Giants at 2,200. So with guys like that, you can pay up more for starting pitching. And I think Sale and Scherzer are the guys to use. You can't really fit both of them in the same lineup. I think it's doable with back-end stacks. So if you want to stack, let's say like the second half of a batting order of one of the teams in a good spot, which I do think is worth doing, then you can use Sale and Scherzer together. So I'm going to guess out of 20 lineups, maybe 3 to 5 of mine have both of these guys in it. And for the rest of them, I'm going to be primarily going with Sale and then somewhat going with Scherzer. Scherzer faces the Pirates at home. They're kind of an average offense, but it is a home game. I think the hitting conditions in Washington are pretty favorable tonight, though, which is bad for Scherzer. It's supposed to be pretty warm. Wind is only blowing out slightly. I guess pretty neutral. But the Pirates lineup is just a lot better than the Royals lineup. They have a 103 WRC plus this season. I don't think anyone is currently out for them. Starling Marte sat yesterday, but he's playing tonight. So we've got Frazier, Polanco, Marte, Bell, Dickerson, Cervelli, Moran, and Mercer. That's all their guys healthy. So the one concern for Scherzer is just that the opposing offense isn't bad. I think they're not that good, but it's just a league average offense. Strikeout rate is only 19.3%, so they're not striking out very much. But Max Scherzer can strike out a ton of guys against anyone. He has over an 18% swinging strike rate this year. So I think Scherzer could do well, but I definitely prefer Sale. I do prefer Scherzer, though, to the other 3 guys that are priced over 10K. So Kershaw, 11,900 in Arizona. I think that's just kind of a tough matchup. The Diamondbacks offense is not very good, but they are better against lefties. I'm just going to double check that. But they were last year. They had JD Martinez for some of the season, so that is a little bit off. The Diamondbacks offense against lefties this year, let's see, they're 102 WRC plus overall and 102 against lefties. I guess they're neutral, so forget that. But it's still a decent offense in a hitter's park. It's a road game. So I think on a smaller slate, like it's Clayton Kershaw. He's the best pitcher in baseball, I think, still. But on a slate this big, and we have Scherzer and Sale going, we have some other pitching choices I like. I'm completely fading Kershaw. I just don't think the expected output is high enough. He's a little expensive, and the matchup it's neutral at best. So then we have Verlander against the Yankees. There's probably no worse matchup than facing the Yankees. The Yankees are also better against righties. It was really a miraculous performance by Charlie Morton yesterday. But Aaron Judge wasn't in the lineup. And tonight, let's see, Yankees lineup should be out already. So everyone's in there. Gardner, Judge, Didi, Stanton, Sanchez, Hicks, Andujar, Austin, Torres. This is a very, very hard matchup for Verlander. So I'm not going there. I just think the hitting it's too scary on the opposition. And there's no price discount for Verlander for the matchup. 11,700 is kind of just what he costs all the time, and he's not priced down facing the Yankees. So no Verlander for me. Syndergaard, I think, is in a similar boat. He's a little cheaper, so he's my favorite of these next three guys between Kershaw, Verlander, and him. But I still don't think I'm going to roster him. The Braves' offense is actually a really solid offense with Acuna up. They have Albies, Acuna, Freeman at the top of the order. It's not a great lineup after that, but Inciarte batting ninth. The Braves' strikeout rate also is not particularly high. So they are striking out just 21% of the time this year. That's against righties. So against right-handed pitching, the Braves have a bottom 10 in the league strikeout rate. I think it's the 8th lowest. So it's really just, I think it's a slightly negative matchup for Syndergaard. I think he'll have lower ownership than some of these other top guys, but I think the price per dollar output for Scherzer and Sale is just higher. So if I'm using someone close to this tier, and I didn't mention him on the podcast last night because I just kind of, I think Greg does too. We just have this idea in our head that Chris Archer is really bad in road games. Archer is at 9,200 against the Tigers, and Archer's price has been historically much higher than that. This year it hasn't because he started out poorly, but last year it was. No Miguel Cabrera in the lineup tonight. So this Detroit lineup is really, really bad. Let's see. We've got Leonis Martin is their leadoff hitter, Candelario, Castellanos, Victor Martinez, and then it's a huge drop-off after that. Jacoby Jones, Nico Goodrum, James McCann, Jose Iglesias, Dixon Machado. It's probably the worst lineup on the board tonight. Like, I think it's a worse offense than the Royals. And the one thing Archer does do well, even though he is kind of blow-up prone, is he gets swings and misses. The swinging strike rate for Archer this year, 14.5%, is actually a career high by a decent amount. He was 13.4% last year, so over a full percentage point higher. And it takes a lot less of a sample for swinging strike rate to matter because the pitcher has a lot more control over that as opposed to something like ERA. Like, we can put a lot more weight into swinging strikes. And Archer is also throwing his first pitch for a strike at a higher rate than he has in his career. He's kind of just gotten unlucky, I think. His ERA is at 6.61, but his FIP is 4.48. His xFIP is 3.80. And I think the strikeout rate at 9.9 actually should go up going forward because it's been higher than that in years past. And his swinging strike rate is higher too, and he's throwing more first pitch strikes. So I think Archer will start pitching a lot better. The home road thing, it really was only true for last season. And for his career, he doesn't really have any abnormal home road splits. So let's see. Last year, Archer allowed... All right, that's this year. Just got to do some quick research. 4.97 ERA on the road last year, 3.26 ERA at home, but the strikeout and walk numbers were not as severe as that sounds. So on the road, Archer had 10.2 Ks per nine, 3 walks per nine. At home, it was better, 12 Ks per nine, 2.4 walks per nine, 425 FIP, 375 xFIP on the road. But that was just last year. For his career, the difference is a lot less pronounced than that. So I'm not actually buying into the home road split difference as much as I previously thought. First career Archer is 392 FIP and a 367 xFIP on the road. And he is getting more swings and misses this year, and he's facing just a really bad offense. I think that's the bottom It's also a pitcher's park in Detroit, and the wind is also blowing in pretty strongly tonight. So the line movement kind of bears all of this out. The over-under opened at close to 9. It's now down almost all the way to 8, so almost a full run drop. I think part of that is because Miguel Cabrera was ruled out, but he wasn't really expected to be playing anyway. So I don't think it has a ton to do with that. And the Rays have also moved from minus 140 to minus 155 or so. And it's not really a public bias either. The public is pretty split on this game. So I think I am going to have a decent amount of Archer exposure. I'm prioritizing Sale first, Scherzer second, I think Archer third. And then I don't think I'll be using any Syndergaard, Verlander, or Kershaw. The cheaper pitchers, it's kind of just going to be whoever fits. So there are, let's see, how many cheap pitching choices are worth looking at? I think it's 3 guys mainly that we can look at for cheap pitching. So we've got Mike Soroka against the Mets, making his MLB debut, Nick Tropiano at home against the Orioles, and Andrew Suarez against the Padres. Suarez and Soroka are definitely wild cards here. They have 1 major league appearance between the 2 of them. Both have pretty easy matchups, although it is an easier matchup for Suarez, but I think Soroka is a more highly regarded prospect who probably has more strikeout potential. Generally speaking, Suarez does face the Padres. I don't think I'm going to be rostering Soroka. I know some people have interest in him, but it's probably a neutral matchup on the road against the Mets. He doesn't have a great chance of getting a win bonus, and I just don't think we need the savings for it. Like, Soroka should probably cost in the 5,000s or so, but I think there's pricing value on guys that are more than that, and the savings just – I don't think it's necessary enough where it really matters here. So in this price range for pitcher, I think it's just kind of go with the guy who you think will do the best, because the difference between a 4K pitcher and a 6K pitcher, it matters, but it's not quite that significant, especially on a slate this large where there are plenty of plugs to use. So Tropiano, I don't think is that good of a pitcher, but he does have a very strong chance of getting the win bonus. The Angels are at home against Alex Cobb. Suarez, not nearly as strong of a chance for a win bonus, but he's facing a fairly depleted Padres lineup that doesn't have Will Myers, doesn't have Hunter Renfroe, and that matters fairly significantly as a left-handed pitcher. So between Suarez, Tropiano, it's really hard to say. Like, I think I'll have a little bit of exposure to both of them, but I'm probably going to be paying up for pitching more often than not here, and that means Sale, Scherzer, and Archer. But Suarez, I think, is worth having in some lineups. Tropiano, some lineups. I think if you're building a really expensive stack where you need the salary savings, I think Soroka is the best choice of the guys that are, min price or whatever. Like, I think he's a better play than Homer Bailey, Zach Eflin, Jordan Garcia. I think he's a better play than Chad Kuhl. And most of these cheap pitchers are pretty bad. Matt Boyd, I don't have any interest, even though I did say his name on the podcast last night. Matt Boyd's not very good. And definitely not James Shields. So just to summarize, I still don't have a great idea of how exposure is going to pan out. We don't have lineups for all of these teams. I'll just see if we can refresh this and maybe get a couple more to give a better indication. But we don't have an Angels lineup, so that's going to make it a little tough. Do we have a Rockies lineup? Okay. So we do have that. Looks like the Rockies have a player here who's not in the player pool that's starting tonight. So I'll get to offense in just a second. Yeah, Daniel Castro. I don't know who that is, and he also is not available on DraftKings. So guess it doesn't matter. Let's see if we can figure out this pitcher exposure. So I'm thinking 75% or so Chris Sale. Then I'm going to try to get Archer and Scherzer around 50% each. I'm probably going to come a bit short on both of them. So maybe 40% Archer, 30% Scherzer. And that'll leave about 50 or 60% left. And I think I may go 30% each of guys like Suarez and Tropiano, maybe Soroka in 1 or 2 lineups. I guess it could seem like a good idea to stack the expensive Angels with the expensive Cardinals. So I guess I'll just get to offense. But Soroka, I think, is very fringy tonight. I think he could be popular, but MLB debut. He wasn't even that good in the minors. I'm not sure he's that good of a pitcher. So I don't have as much interest in Soroka as Suarez and Tropiano. But offense is much more straightforward. So it's the Angels and Cardinals. Those were the teams we talked about on the podcast last night. But I also think I have more interest in the Wrigley game than it seemed like yesterday. The wind is really strong there. So I think we're looking at 15 to 20 miles per hour, but the gusts are going to be much stronger than that. The pitching matchup is a good one, but it kind of seems like any fly ball here is going to be pretty close, if not over the fence. We're going to see a very high home run to fly ball rate tonight. And the Vegas line really supports this. So last night we didn't have a Vegas line for reference, but the over-under for this game is 10.5, which is by far the highest of any game. So I still think the two teams that score the most runs are the Angels and Cardinals, especially the Cardinals. But the nature of the runs scored in the Wrigley game, it's going to be more home run dependent because we have good pitchers who aren't going to let the ball get put in play too much, especially not John Gray. But the balls that are hit in the air, we could see a disproportionate amount of home runs in that game. So for DFS potential, I think that is the strongest game to target. The prices are not really that low. So for value, my favorite offense is the Cardinals. I think the Angels are worth having, but they're going to fall back a little bit for me because I do like this Rockies-Cubs game. Anthony Rizzo is hitting leadoff, which is kind of strange, but there is some value down the lineup here. Zobrist, 3,700 hitting third. Russell, 3,200 hitting fourth. I think Bryant's a fine play as someone to pay up for. Schwarber's 4,400. Definitely a lot of home run upside there. On the Rockies, Cargo is hitting fourth at 3,700. He's going to be my highest on Rockies player. I don't have a ton of interest in David Dahl. I just don't think he's that good, and his stats are definitely boosted by Coors Field. And he's up to 4,000 now, but I think he's fine for stacks. I think Arenado's fine. Charlie Blackmon is a good play tonight. Trevor Story is pretty bad against righties, so I don't know if I'll use any of him. Like, I strongly prefer Addison Russell to Trevor Story for shortstop in that game, and Russell is significantly cheaper. Ian Desmond is just awful, so I probably won't be using any of him. I think Walters is a decent punt for catcher, but this game should have it should be a good source for plugs. I think having some stacks of both sides is worth doing, especially on the Cubs side. But I'm going to try to have a lot of exposure to this game just throughout other lineups. But the core team to stack tonight, it's the Cardinals against James Shields. Tommy Pham is really the only Cardinals player who is expensive, but Pham is really good. He steals bases. He's leading off. It's a good spot in the order for him. Shields is terrible, walks a lot of guys, so that kind of supports Pham's ability to steal bases. So I'm fine with paying up for Pham, but I definitely will have a decent amount of Cardinal stacks that don't include him just because of how expensive he is. And it is pretty reasonable to make stacks of contacts. Okay. Reasonable to make stacks of Cardinals that are kind of the back end of the order and use Scherzer and Sale together in those lineups. So Pham, he's not going to be my highest owned Cardinals player, but I do think he's a good play. The guys I'm most heavily targeting, Carpenter, Martinez, Ozuna, I think those are the three best plays. The prices actually go up as you get further down the order. But I think Carpenter, Martinez, and Ozuna could be my three highest owned players tonight. I think Molina's fine, but he's a little pricey. Fowler's fine. DeYoung is fine. I think Colton Wong's a good play at 2,800 as a punt or just a value play. So the Cardinals also are getting a little bit of a boost from the wind blowing out to left field. Looks like 15 miles per hour. And for right-handed hitters, which they have a lot of, that's definitely a good thing. So if I had to pick one Cardinals player, it's Marcell Ozuna. Righty with power, definitely good chance to hit a home run against Shields in any stadium, but with the wind helping in left field, it's a very, very good spot for Marcell Ozuna. But this team as a whole is in a really good situation tonight. So I'm prioritizing the Cardinals, the Cubs, some of the Rockies, the Angels, but we don't have we don't have an Angels lineup yet. Hopefully we get one before lock. Still don't see one. So can't really do anything yet with that. Ohtani may be playing today. He's 4,500. I think he'd be fine, but Trout is definitely my favorite player to pay up for tonight. I think everyone else is fine, although Albert Pujols just isn't a good hitter. He's just bad. So I don't have a lot of interest in Pujols. Like Jose Martinez is the same price. I'd rather use him. I'd rather use Luis Valbuena if he's starting. Just have to find his price. Valbuena is cheaper than Pujols too. But Kinsler, Cozart, Simmons, Calhoun, I think those are all good plays. Alex Cobb has just been really bad this year. He's clearly still bothered by, well, he had Tommy John, he had a shoulder injury. He's not right now. Maybe he goes back to being semi-decent, which he was 3 or 4 years ago, but Cobb has been not very good for quite some time now, and this year it's gotten a lot worse. So it's definitely a good spot for the Angels, but I'm definitely putting the Cardinals ahead of them. I'm putting the Cubs ahead of them. Maybe I have a similar amount of interest in the Rockies compared to the Angels. The other offense that I like a lot, and I think this is going to be much more of a contrarian pick. Let me see if I can find their pricing now. The Oakland A's against Felix Hernandez. I know Greg likes them too, but the line movement here definitely favors that sentiment. So the over-under for this Oakland game opened at 8. It's now up to 9. Very heavy public betting on Seattle, but the line hasn't moved towards Seattle. Felix Hernandez has some really bad numbers this year. His velocity is down. His strikeouts are down. His walks are up. All right, it's loading the Felix page. 7.2 Ks per 9, 3.3 walks per 9. He has a 537 FIP, 469 xFIP. He's getting the fewest amount of ground balls that he has in his career at 38%. He's giving up a decent amount of homers, and yeah, I think Felix is kind of just done, even at 32 years old. It's sad, but I think he's pretty awful now. His swinging strike percentage is down to 7.4%. His career average there is 10.2. Last year was his previous career low at 9.6. Well, I think maybe very early in his career he was a little lower than that. But 7.4 is by far the lowest this year. And the A's offense, there are definitely some value plays here. Matt Joyce leading off 3,000, I think is a really strong play. Matt Olson, 3,700. Matt Chapman, 3,800. So everyone named Matt in the A's lineup. It's not a bias. It's just the way it's working out. But Semien, Lowry, and Davis, I don't like as much. Davis, though, 4,200 for his home run upside. I think he's a really good play. Lowry and Semien might miss the cut a little bit for me. At second base, I definitely prefer Matt Carpenter, but the A's are a sneaky stack spot. They could score a ton of runs. Felix definitely is homer prone. The Mariners bullpen is not very good. So I like the A's too as kind of like a fifth offense, but I'm definitely prioritizing mostly those first 4, but I think the A's could make some lineups for me. The last game to target, I think that's worth talking about, is the Brewers-Reds game. The prices here are just kind of expensive. So the Brewers are going to be popular against Homer Bailey. Bailey is definitely not good, even though his ERA has been a little bit lower this year. It's just entirely a fluke. But Kane, Yelich, Braun, and Shaw are all priced in the 4,000, so they're a lot more expensive than the Cardinals. They're kind of in the same range as the Angels. I think the expected output is close for them, but I think it's higher for these other teams. So I think, yeah, I probably won't have any Brewers exposure tonight. It's kind of a similar case to last night where I felt if you had 4,000, 4,500 left for a last lineup spot, I definitely don't hate the idea of using Kane, Yelich, or Braun, Shaw at third base, although I do like other guys more. I probably won't have any Travis Shaw tonight because Chris Bryant, Nolan Arenado, Matt Carpenter, all third base eligible. But if you can fit Brewers guys into other stacks, I like them as plugs. I don't really have that much interest in them as a stack, though. The red side, kind of the same thing. Jesse Winker is not in the lineup tonight. He's been a pretty good source of cheap value in the leadoff spot, but he's not playing tonight. Adam Duvall is hitting second. He's 3,700. I think he's worth using. Votto, Schebler, Suarez. The prices have kind of gone up a little bit for the Reds. They've been really good over the last week. So I don't think I'll have any Reds just because the prices are a little high. But if you can fit Duvall, I think he's worth having. That's probably it, though. So I'm just going to, that's the last thing here. I'm going to scan for value plays because that's pretty important tonight. We're going to need some very cheap guys to kind of round out some of these lineups. One team that I don't have really much interest in stacking, partially because of the stadium, but I do think could be a good source for plugs, is Tampa. So Hechavarria leading off is 3,100. I probably won't have much of him because Addison Russell is basically the same price. But Matt Duffy is 3,000, batting third. Johnny Field is batting ninth, but he's min price, like I mentioned before. So I think Duffy and Johnny Field are good plays. Ref Snyder is second base and outfield eligible at 2,900, so I think he's okay. Matt Boyd just can't get righties out. He's really bad against right-handed batters, and the wind is blowing in from right field, so to left field, it's going to be a little bit easier to hit a home run than it would be to right field. Down the left field line, I guess it would be kind of like a crosswind. So I think that the Rays righties are fine, and I guess their entire lineup basically is right-handed. So the Rays are in a decent spot. Not so much for a stack because I don't think they'll score a ton of runs tonight, but I think they're cheap enough where as value plays, some of these guys are worth having. Tony Wolters, 2,300. He's a pretty bad hitter, but there's so much wind that if he just hits some fly balls, maybe he'll get lucky and hit a homer tonight. Victor Caratini is catching for the Cubs tonight. He's 2,900. Who else do we have for cheap? Okay. Robbie Grossman leading off 3,000 for the Twins with Dozier and Sano out of the lineup. I probably won't use him because I prefer Matt Joyce leading off at outfield for the same price. So not going to use any Twins guys. Let's see. Colton Wong I mentioned before on the Cardinals, 2,800. And there are a couple of teams we don't have lineups yet for. Just scrolling back up to the top here. So we've got Adam Frazier leading off. That's against Max Scherzer, though. Yeah, definitely no interest in Pirates hitters tonight. There are some cheap guys in the Phillies-Marlins game. So Derek Dietrich is an outfielder at 2,800, batting fourth. Starlin Castro at 3,000. Brian Anderson, 2,900. I think those guys would make for good plugs. On the Phillies side, yeah, the prices are a little high. But I think Marlins for plugs is definitely worth doing. There really is. It's not a lot of cheap value, but there's enough where it'll make it viable to fit inexpensive pitching. So I'm going to probably have a decent amount of Johnny Field tonight. Gregor Blanco, too, if he's starting. So that's a pretty big one at 2,200 leading off. I'll probably have a decent amount of Blanco exposure if he's in the leadoff spot. So we'll just kind of have to wait and see there. But it doesn't really look like there's anyone else worth having. So not a lot of volume of value plays, but there's just enough where I think it makes paying up for expensive pitchers worth it and doable. So that's going to wrap it up. Thanks for watching, everyone. As always, we'll be back tomorrow, and see you then.